Hello and welcome everyone to Scottish Summit 2021, and thank you all for attending this session on the Pro Apps Component Framework. Before we begin, I hope you are all doing well with this global pandemic situation, and keep your head high and don't give up. Things can only get better. Before I start and introduce myself, I would like to thank the organization team and all the sponsors that you can see on this slide, because it's thanks to them that this kind of event is possible, even if it's virtually. So, my name is Allan de Castro. I'm a technical consultant working for Allan France. I'm originally from the D365 customer engagement world, and I'm becoming more and more involved in the community, so do not hesitate to contact me either on Twitter or on my blog. So during this PCF session, we'll try to follow the following agenda. So first, a presentation of the framework to understand what it is, and then the most fun part, live demonstration. Finally, a part to understand how to get started with this framework and start playing with it. And of course, I will answer your question. So to get started, the question is quite simple. What is the Pro Apps Component Framework? If we pay attention to the whole Power Platform stack that you all already know, we can find the four main Power services: Power BI, Power App, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agent. And if we place the PCF, it's just here. PCF is the component that allows us to extend this platform to develop custom components for the UI for Power Apps. So Model of an apps, Canvas app, and Portal. So the first component concept arrived in 1916 with optimized controls, especially for mobile device. And after the availability and release of the unified interface, the first custom controls appeared for Dynamics 365, which can be visible on mobile, tablet, and more traditionally on the web client. So, for example, there's the editable grid that was quite expected, and at this stage, we talk about custom control, which use a proprietary Microsoft framework. So it's something really dark. But after the rebranding of the Power Platform, they just rename it to Power Apps Component, and finally, they announced the preview of the Power Apps Component Framework in April 2019. When Microsoft started building, the app for Dynamics 365 and started to reimagining them, they needed to find something to build components that would work on different devices. So they have therefore invested to allow the engineer to manage different implementation between browser, operating system, so iOS, Android, etc. So they created a framework that make it easier for the developer, so the first-party developer, to build components that can be used by different applications and to be able to be part of the ALM, process. And as soon as they were able to build this framework, Microsoft had already, the idea to expose it to the third-party developer, so the community, you and me, and so we can now create your own custom component. And many things are already designed with this framework, so it's something we already use without even knowing it. So we'll be able to replace, the user experience provided by the out-of-the-box product and insert our own in terms of visualization, or even if we want to make embedded components with, a logic by making some external code, etc. So the advantage when we create a custom component is that it's an integral part of the application lifecycle of the form. It's this one that will feed the component. The application will feed the component with data, and we will be able to add some parameter to make it dynamic and adaptable to any other context. So the important thing is that all components are configurable. It's not specific to an entity or anything else. So you already know some of them that exist as a standard. So it can be on field, for example, or dataset. So here are some examples. You can see, for example, a list of appointments displayed using the calendar control. We can also add them in data step, but also use them to retrieve data from external services. So for example, for Azure Maps or LinkedIn. Basically, LinkedIn Sales Navigator use this framework. What about the availability? So for your information, this is a feature that has been released quite recently. So we are talking about April for the 2019 for the public preview and October for the general availability. So here we are only talking about model of an app, but for the Canvas app, it was like public preview November 2019 and general availability 2020. So when we talk about components, we must make the difference between the Canvas app type components with the use of the basic expression to connect some basic control and the components built using code that will allow us to go much further. So for the Canvas type components, we can create component by connecting the basic control to each other using the low code expression that I think we all know very well. And we will still be able to indicate input and output properties, okay? The real point here is this type of component can be modified by citizen developer, okay? But for the pro components, using the framework, we will also connect with basic control, but here it will be a question of using code, so development, and TypeScript in particular, to implement the logic, and thus to have a large panel of possibility, and that also apply to the UI side, okay? So we will able to use in a native way the web API of Dataverse, and for this kind of components, they will be consumed like a black box in the sense that only a developer will be able to look inside and modify it. So only the parameter will be able to be changed by the customizer or the maker. So to sum up, we have here a framework for developer agencies that really focus on the user experience. It uses the standard of web technologies, so no proprietary language. For example, you can take a sample code from CodePen, for example, to design a PCF. So you have a direct access to the context of the form for a model of an app, and you can easily interact with the web API. It can be packaged as a managed or unmanaged solution thanks to the tool. It can be made dynamic and configurable by the people who install it. This is where the component asset concept makes sense, and we don't have to worry about the support because the control adapts itself according to the configuration and the device. So when loading the form, you won't have to retrieve the information from our component because the component is really part of the app, so it will be more powerful and faster than an iframe or a web resources. So here are some examples of components created by the community. So here we have the possibility to have a field of type choice with some categories of option, as you can see in gray. a component that allows us to use a particular font from Google Fonts. Here we will display, the value of a field as a barcode. We can have, a serial and serial number validation component. A component allowing the display and formatting of a phone number with, the country code. We can adding a set of tag to a record. We can have, a visualization of a list of record, for example, a list of tasks has a timeline with a progression bar, like a Gantt chart. We can also have this kind of component that allow us to view stages or categories of a business process flow used on a list of records. So now let's switch to the live demonstration part, but first of all, I will just take a moment to talk about this wonderful website. So I just want to tell you about the PCF Gallery site, where you can find a lot of different PCF. It's totally free, okay, and it's maintained by the community, so you can check it out, and it's a wonderful thing. Okay, let's switch to the demo. So I just opened a basic D365 model app application. As you can see here, we have a basic model app with only icons and opportunities, and we are on an icon form. And as you can see, it's quite, it's quite white, if we can say. And the thing here is, well, I'm going to switch to another form to display some PCF, for example. And the use case will be to add some not only some UI, some colors, but also to bring some functional logic. Okay. So let's imagine that you have these icons, and we're going to switch to another icon form. And as you can see here, there are some components already installed that I did just before. For example, here we have this one. It will allow us, to indicate and to format, basically the phone number, and then to indicate the country code, but using the appropriate flag. So if we change, for example, the value, it will automatically change, the flag, and as you can see, it's formatted according to the country code. If I switch to the French one, it's automatically changed. We have this kind of component here about, the VAT number. I think that you all know about this kind of thing. When, for example, you want to create an account, you want to be sure that this account is real, is valid, and you can use the VAT number like it's an official number. And you can use this component to not only understand where it comes from, but to be sure that it's valid or not based on the European Commission. So we can imagine, a lot of business case where you want, for example, your user to create an account and ensure that it's a valid one. So it's all about, the data quality thing. So if we, for example, try to change here, and as you can see, the name change and the address is changed. So we can retrieve based on a VAT number the name of an account. We can be sure that it's valid or not, and we can retrieve the official addresses, which is quite nice. We can have some component like this one, for example. If you remember, the composite address is not yet supported on the initial interface. So someone already developed this behavior of, by clicking on a field, you can have, this pop-up here where you can change the address. So for example, you can say state 1 in Paris. You can change the postal code of Paris, France, and it will automatically populate each field according to the configuration. And you can open it again, change it, and it works. As you can see, there's another component here. This one comes from Castro, so it allows you to, to have an overview of an account of all related records. And so, as you can see, you can, click on a specific entity, here a case. You can have an opportunity. You can change a little bit, the representation. And at any moment, you can click normally on the link to open the record. So here we are going, to go to the PCF Gallery website, download a solution of a PCF, import it to the database environment, and set up this component. So I'm switching now to the PCF Gallery here, and I will just find mine. So I'm looking for a specific author, myself here. You can see this components. I will click on this one. And you can have a lot of information about the PCF component. And here we are going to click on download. Okay, and you can click on the release and download the managed solution. So we're going to save it. Well, now we are switching to the solution page of the database environment. We're going to import it. And so here we are going just, to import the component that we just downloaded. Okay, so just for that, so we're going to browse. We have this one here. Click on next. And we just have to wait now. Well, when it's finished, you just have, to close the import pop-up. And by refreshing, you can see here the business process flow viewer. And so we are going to add it to the main form. So, and we are going to add this component to the first subguide, so the opportunities subguide. So I'll click on the change properties. So here we are going to add a new control, and up. It's a little bit slow. And once it's loaded, you can click on the control tab, and here we're going to add a control, and you can click on business process flow viewer, and as you can see, it's the one we just imported. So we're going to click on add and select on which type of device this component will be used. So here we are selecting all, but we'll only use, the web client. And as you can see, there's a lot of, properties here. So we'll check it after. I'm going just to click on OK, save, and then publish the form to ensure that this change will be displayed on the account form. So normally it will finish soon. Yep. So now we are going, to switch to account form, and as you can see here, I will just perform a simple refresh. As you can see now, it's not just only a sample out-of-the-box subguide. Okay, we can see the components here, which display all the stage of a BPF, and you have the name of the opportunity just right here, and you can click if you want to open the record. And so, as I said, if we click on the record, it just opens the specific opportunities here. And we are on the Happy New Day training opportunities. Okay, great. So now we'll try, to add this PCF again, but on, the case entity. Okay, so we're switching again to the form, and we're going to customize the subguide by changing the properties as we did for the opportunities. And we're clicking control. We're going to add the business pro viewer, and here we're going to change the specific parameter. Okay, it's parameters that allow us, to specify what are the BPF used for this for these entities basically. So we're going just to change this one. So I just copied a specific JSON parameter here, as you can see in the URL, and I just passed it here to ensure that it's a good BPF that will be used for the visualization. And so if we click on OK, save, published, I will just wait and cut the video right now. Okay, so now it's over, and if we switch to the icons, you will see that the case subgrade is also displayed using this PCF control. It's loading, and now here we have the case displayed like the opportunities. But here the problem is it's green for opportunities and case, so we're going just to change some specific color to ensure that for case we have another design. So I'm switching again to the icon form here. I will change the properties of this PCF. Click on control, and here, as you can see, there are several properties here saying that we can change the color or the completed color of a stage, for example. Okay, so we are going to change some color. So I'm just copying. Also for the completed color here, we are going to put some red color, completed text color. We put the same here. Okay, and we are going to put like the active text color here up. And the last thing, we are going to change, the pulse color. So here, OK, saving, and publishing. So now we're going again to the icons. We're trying to refresh the form, and normally, it's not yet published. Great. And as you can see here, we have the same component added twice on form, but with some specific color. And the good point is, for this PCF, I decided, to add a lot of properties. So like that, the customizer or the maker can choose what kind of design is looking for. So you can even choose to display or not, the entity name. You can say that, for example, I don't want this pulse color, so you can say that I remove here the value, up, saving, and publishing, and we'll see what's happened to this PCF. Okay, refreshing the formula. Up. Not yet published. And as you can see here, we do not have the principal field here, the name of the entity, and we do not have this pulse color here. So it's depend of what you're looking for, but you can decide just by using the property, which is a really good thing. I just wanted to show you another out-of-the-box component. So for this one, I will show you the opportunities view. And you will see here, I just added an out-of-the-box component called Kanban. And as you can see, we have the ability to display a list of opportunity based on the business process flow or based on a status. And so you can, switch from one to another if you want. And okay, this opportunity is now 1. So you have the close opportunities resolution activity. And okay, it's now win. So it's an out-of-the-box component. It's totally free, so that's why I wanted to show you this. Okay, great. So now I will switch to the slide. Well, so I hope you had to find this live demonstration quite useful. So one of the components we've just seen, this business process flow viewer that I've created, allows to visualize the progress of a record in relation to the business process flow used, and we have a certain number of parameters that we can modify to manage different type of BPF and manage colors and also certain feature like to display the name of the record or decide to display by stage or by categories. So it's totally free on my GitHub project, and you can add it for any out of the box BPF or entities, but also for custom entities and BPF. And you also have some example of properties and configuration if you want to understand what property used for each color, etc. Okay, great. So now the goal is to go deeper into this Power Apps component framework that we can totally consider as the new generation of web resources. So we'll be able to use many of the web technologies that you are certainly familiar with, and we have to create a very interesting component. So there's TypeScript, which is the mandatory language for building a PCF. We have HTML, CSS, Angular, jQuery, and we have the NPM, so the official package manager of Node.js, Node.js, which is the JavaScript runtime environment. And you can use some new kind of library like React, which is a free JavaScript library developed by Facebook since 2013. And here is a sample explanation of how the framework works. So we can consider it as the relationship between an electrical device that is going to be powered by an electrical outlet. So when we plug the components into the outlet, we must ensure to implement a specific architecture, so the framework itself, and so we can have access to a lot of things like metadata, field, etc. So all about the form context, for example. So it's a completely different approach compared to the web resource. In this case, we are retrieving the data information, while here it's the application itself that feeds the component. So before starting to build a component, you should not hesitate to ask yourself some questions. So I like this picture, basically, and this quote that could apply to many situations, because it says that when you're building a bridge, you have to think about the end user, the people who are crossing it. So for PCF, it's the same thing. So that's why I have this slide, thinking before acting, because first of all, it's essential to ask a few questions about the usefulness of this component, the type of data it will rely on, the services it will use, and above all, the design. And I really support this last point, because the very purpose of an asset in general, in our case a PCF, must not only meet the technical needs, but also implement ergonomic that will improve the visualization of information and navigation, etc., and therefore the increase the appropriation of the application by the end user. So for my part, I always try to start from an existing need, whether it's an ID found on a forum, a professional need, or simply a personal ID to display information in a much sexier format. So first, because a good gardener never starts work without his tools, you must do the same. So in our case, these tools are quite simple to have. So you have to download NPM and Node.js. You need to ensure that you have the .NET framework installed on your machine, and then install the perhaps CLI. So that an XM toolbox plugin exists and it can help you to implement your components. Okay, and we'll check it just after that. So what is the Power App CLI? The Power App CLI is a tool provided by Microsoft that will help developers to build some specific project like PCF, so custom control, plugin, web resource, and it's something that is currently evolving. So I think that you have really an interest to try this tool. Okay. Using this tool, as you can see with this chart animation, you can build a PCF and it will tell you if there's something wrong. So there's the built-in validation. If you did something wrong, it will not be possible to build the solution and then to deploy it to the database environment. So as you can see here in the animation, I'm building a PCF, and when the build is currently executed, we can see that at the end we'll have state that's saying okay, it's a success or not. So here we're on the last phases of the build, and normally we'll see the build is succeeded, so you can deploy your solution. So as I said, there's an XM Toolbox plugin which is quite nice, so I recommend you to use it because it will allow you to use UI interface to execute the Power App CLI command, and so you just have to click on specific button if you want to build your PCF, if you want to deploy it. So it's quite nice and it's quite faster than using the command line. So now, what makes a custom component? So the first thing to understand is that there are two different types of PCF project. Okay, two different templates based on a field or based on a data set. Okay, so depending on your choice, the properties of the components will therefore not be the same. So there's the manifest file. It's a file where we can define the control, the name, the version, all the properties, and also the resource files that will be used, for example, the image, CSS, etc. Then there's the component implementation, so it's all related to the code basically. So the TypeScript index.ts file, for example, where you will implement your business logic and also the UI thing. And then the resource file where you have all the CSS file, the images file, and sometimes your resource file if you want to translate some specific thing. So here is a basic command to initialize a component. So you define a namespace, a name, and the template to be used. And so it will generate a lot of files related to the project itself. And you can see on the right the file that you will have to modify today to code the components. If we look at the manifest, we'll see that this is where we will specify which property the PCF has and also the different parameters that will set free to modify for the customizer, for the makers, etc. And as you can see here for the business process reviewer, we can change the color. So in the manifest, we just specify all those properties here. We are also using this manifest to say, okay, I will use this specific resource file. So here I'm using an image, a CSS file, and basically the index.ts, which is the code part of this PCF. And you can also enable some specific feature like if you want to access to the camera of a phone, for example, you have to tell the component that you are going to use it. And it's the same for the web API. If you want to perform some requests, etc., you have to say in the manifest, I'm going to use the web API. So as I was saying, we have to respect a certain architecture imposed by the framework. So we have to make sure to understand the life cycle of a component. So when the index.ts is, file is generated, we have like four basic functions. We have the init function that will be used, to initialize the DOM elements, the DOM HTML element of the PCF, and what we're going to do when the PCF is created. Then we have the update view. So it's called when the value of a property are changed. So for example, the data is dataset refresh for subgrade, or when a value is changed on the form. Then you have the destroy function that is used, if you want to remove this PCF from the DOM. And you have the get output function that is used, when you want to send back value to the application. So here is an example of how a component will be executed. So the constructor is first called when the form is built, okay? Then the init function that builds the PCF, and finally the update view function. So when we want to tell the component that there's an update to do to the application, we will call the notify output change that will trigger the get output function where we specified the value to be returned to the application. Okay, so just a gentle warning: if you have bound your component to the same field on which you decide to return a value, it will trigger again the update view, and so you will have a loop. Here are the basic commands used to build the component and also to test it locally, which will allow you, as you see it, to use, for example, a CSV file to simulate a data set. So as you can see, you can also use Fiddler to debug your PCF for Canvas app, but also for model of an app, basically. So once the project has been created and finalized, I mean, you ended the code phases, we must create a solution that can be deployed in your environment. So to do this, we first create a folder and then initiate the project by specifying the publisher, etc. Then we add the reference of our component. Then we build the component following the type of solution we want to use, so manage or unmanage. And now all we have to do is, just install the solution as we've seen in the demo. Here is a summary as an image that will be available in my slides, so you can have an overview on how to build a PCF, okay, in a sample image. It comes from a guide from Microsoft France. If you want to go deeper in the PCF thing, here are some references, all related about Microsoft documentation or events, etc. But I also added some specific blog posts from the community, and as you can see, there's also mine on my blog post here. You can check it out because I did a lot of blog posts about that, and you have also the last episode that will explain to you how to create basically a PCF from scratch. So thanks a lot, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this session. It was a real pleasure for me to be here at Scottish Summit 2021. So if you have any question, I'm ready to answer them, and feel free to reach me on social media.